You think you know brutal regimes, secret police, midnight arrests. But in 1980s Romania under Nicolae Ceaușescu, students faced something different. Not just surveillance, not just imprisonment. A system so invasive it turned classrooms into interrogation rooms, professors into informants, and your own friends into eyes for the state. November 15, 1987. Brasov. A student named Catalin Bia sits outside his university canteen holding a single placard. The arrested workers must not die. 2 classmates join him. Lucian Salagi. Horia Sherban. 3 students, 1 sign. Within minutes, Securitate agents swarm the campus. All 3 arrested. Expelled from university. Sent back to their hometowns under permanent surveillance. Their families watched. Their mail opened. Their futures destroyed. Because they held a sign. That same day, graffiti appears on campus walls, supporting the Brasov workers who had revolted hours earlier against wage cuts and starvation rations. Securitate teams conduct 7 more arrests. 7 students, total, no trials. No charges announced publicly, just investigations, expulsions, a return to villages where everyone knows what you did, where the secret police remind your parents monthly that their child is a problem. This is how Ceaușescu judged students. Swift, silent, total. If you value documented Romanian history and totalitarian resistance like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual using sources from Denis Delatant's Ceaușescu and the Securitate, published by M.E. Sharp in 1995, one of the only comprehensive works by a Western scholar granted full access to Securitate archives, and Radio Romania International's documented accounts from the Oral History Center, published February 2024, preserving first-hand testimonies of persecution survivors. Now back to the information. 1989, November 11. Brezoianu Street and Cogolnicianu Boulevard in Bucharest. Students from Cluj march with placards reading, "We want reforms against Ceaușescu government." Mihnea Paraschivescu. Grațian Vulpe. Dan Căprariu Schlachter, an economist from Cluj. Others whose names were never recorded. Within hours, all detained. Transported to Rahova Penitentiary. Not a police station, a penitentiary. Investigated by Securitate for propaganda against socialist society. Held for 41 days. Released December 22, 1989 at 2 p.m., hours before Ceaușescu fled Bucharest. The regime fell that fast. But those 41 days, interrogations, isolation, psychological pressure. The Securitate wanted names. Who organized this? Who provided the placards? Who else thinks reform is needed? The students knew what happened to those who talked. They had seen it. 1956, Timișoara. The Hungarian Revolution sends shockwaves through Eastern Europe. Romanian students in university centers react. 3,000 arrested in Timișoara alone. Mass expulsions across the country. The pattern starts early. Any student movement crushed before it breathes. The state learned from 1956. Never let students organize again. By 1980, Ceaușescu had refined the system into something clinical. The Securitate recruited over 200,000 informants between 1980 and 1989, according to CNSAS data. The National Council for the Study of Securitate archives. Of those new recruits, 30,200 had higher education. Over 4,300 were students, active students, recruited while studying, paid or coerced to report on classmates, professors, family dinner conversations. 8,500 informants came from education. Teachers monitoring students, university staff watching faculty. A surveillance web so tight that historians estimate by 1989 1 in 3 Romanians was connected to the Securitate as informant, collaborator, or target. Students represented both threat and resource, educated, idealistic, connected to Western ideas through smuggled books and Radio Free Europe broadcasts. The regime needed them controlled. Some recruited willingly for privileges, better dorm rooms, guaranteed jobs after graduation, permission to travel abroad a near impossibility for ordinary Romanians. Others coerced with threats. Your mother needs cancer treatment at the state hospital. Your brother applied for university admission. Your father's job at the factory is being reviewed. Sign here, report monthly. The Securitate perfected pressure without violence. Though violence waited when pressure failed, historians at the Institute for Studying Communist Crimes uncovered evidence in 2006 of an even darker recruitment pattern. Children, and CBU controlled. Like a personal fiefdom by Ceaușescu's son Nicu in the 1980s, the Securitate recruited 830 informants in 1989 alone. 170 were under 18, children aged 12 to 14. Marius Oprea, the historian who uncovered the files, estimated based on CBU's numbers that perhaps 15% of Romania's entire informant network was minors. Children spying on schoolmates, parents, teachers. Casimir Ionescu from the State Council, studying the archives, confirmed complex networks of child informants existed in every county. What information could children provide, except family opinions? Whether parents listened to Western radio, whether they made jokes about Ceaușescu? The Securitate wasn't hunting dissidents anymore. It was controlling everyone. Dan Voynia, the public prosecutor investigating these cases after 1989, called it incredible abuse. Several recruiters were promoted through Securitate ranks after the revolution. Some brought their young informants to work alongside them when they left school. The abuse never faced legal consequences. The perpetrators remained in power. This is how totalitarian systems survive their own collapse. The people who ran them stay in the institutions that replaced them. But let's go back to the universities. 1980s. To be a student meant navigating an invisible maze. Your roommate might report your conversations. Your study group might include a Securitate plant. That professor who seemed sympathetic, who mentioned banned authors, who asked what you really thought about the regime. Could be testing you, or could be genuine and himself under surveillance. Trust became impossible. Friendships strained under suspicion. The Securitate didn't need to arrest everyone. Fear of being watched was enough. One shadow group of dissidents, according to Securitate documents, limited itself to 3 families. Any larger, and they risked detection. That's how effective the fear was. Real organizing became nearly impossible. Students who showed promise attracted special attention. Intelligence, athletic ability, leadership qualities. The Securitate targeted these specifically according to testimony from former agents. Sporty children got access to teams and clubs. Meant more people, more teachers, more families. Perfect vectors for information gathering. Similarly, university students with high marks with political science or economics backgrounds, with language skills that meant potential contact with foreigners, all watched more closely. The better you were, the more dangerous you became. Let's talk about what happened when students pushed too far. Cătălin Bia, Lucian Silagi, Horia Șerban, arrested November 1987 after the Brasov workers' revolt. They weren't tortured publicly. No show trials. Instead, something more insidious. Investigated. That word appears repeatedly in Securitate files. Investigated. Which meant interrogations lasting hours. Sleep deprivation. Psychological manipulation. Being told your family would suffer. Your mother would lose her job. Your father's pension revoked. Your younger siblings denied university admission. The Securitate weaponized your love for family against you. And it worked. Most students broke, gave names, provided details about who said what where, then lived with that guilt forever. After investigation came expulsion, not just from university, from the city. Students sent back to their home villages or towns, placed under surveillance, required to check in with local police weekly, their academic careers destroyed. In communist Romania, without a university degree, your job options narrowed to manual labor. The factories, the fields. For someone who had tasted education, who had dreamed of becoming an engineer, a doctor, a teacher, expulsion meant a future erased. And everyone in your hometown knew why you were back. The Securitate made sure of that. Shame as punishment, social death as deterrent. Some expelled students were sent to forced labor. The canal, 2 canals actually, one in the 1950s when the first one was established, another in the 1970s and 80s. Hundreds of students, according to ANOSR, the National Alliance of Student Organizations in Romania, were deported to canal construction projects. Hard labor, minimal food, brutal conditions. This wasn't unique to students. Political prisoners, intellectuals, clergy, anyone who opposed the regime faced the canal. But students as a category represented future opposition. Young, educated, idealistic, the regime wanted them broken early, before they could organize, before they could inspire others. The 1987 Brasov revolt shows the pattern perfectly. Workers at the Stagul Roșu bus factory received wages on November 14, cut in half. No explanation. Night shifts struck immediately. November 15 morning, 20,000 workers marched through Brasov. Workers from Hydromechanica factory joined. Townspeople joined. They stormed Communist Party headquarters. Threw Ceaușescu portraits through windows. Found food stockpiles. Oranges, pineapples. Foods unavailable in stores for years. Rage exploded. Party records burned in the square. Furniture destroyed. One party activist beaten. By dusk, Securitate and military surrounded the city center. No one killed in the suppression. That detail matters. Ceaușescu learned from 1977's Jew Valley miners' strike. Public executions created martyrs. Instead, 300 arrested. Tortured during detention by militia and Securitate. December 3, 1987. Trials began. 61 protest leaders charged. Called hooligans and depraved members of society. Sentences 3 to 5 years prison. Forced relocation to different cities after release. Only one protester died, Vasile Vieru, father of 5, 9 months after his trial. From torture injuries, students who showed solidarity. 7 arrested for graffiti and leaflets. Cătălin Bia and his 2 friends arrested for 1 placard. Total control through targeted suppression. The regime didn't need mass arrests. It needed visible examples. This is what happens when you resist. Your education ends. Your family suffers. Your body breaks in interrogation. The message received: let's pivot to something the regime barely hid. Decree 770, October 1966. Ceaușescu banned abortion and contraception. Women over 45, initially 40, Later raised, back to 45 could get abortions. Women with 4 children. Later 5. Women whose lives were medically threatened. Women pregnant from rape or incest. Everyone else, no choice. The decree aimed to increase Romania's population from 20 million to 30 million. More workers meant more production, meant more power. That was the theory. Reality looked different. Society strictly controlled. Contraceptives removed from sale. Women required to undergo monthly gynecological exams at their workplaces. Any detected pregnancy followed until birth. Women with histories of abortion watched particularly carefully. Medical practitioners held partially responsible for the national birth rate. Think about that. Doctors blamed if birth rates fell. Securitate agents stationed in maternity hospitals. A specialized service controlling gynecologists and nurses. Officers examined stillborn children to verify they hadn't been illegally aborted. Dr. Elena Borza told Interpress news agency in Romania that out of desperation, women resorted to insane methods. Salt, detergent, any substance they thought could help them get rid of the baby. Underground abortions without anesthetics. Without proper instruments, over 9,000 women died between 1965 and 1989 from complications of illegal abortions. Maternal mortality became the highest in Europe under Ceaușescu. While childbed mortality rates declined in neighboring countries, Romania's increased to more than 10 times its neighbors. What does this have to do with students? Everything. Female university students lived under this decree. Pregnancy meant your education stopped. No exceptions. The regime praised motherhood as the meaning of women's lives, but provided no support for student mothers. Drop out, return home, raise the child. Your academic career over. Male students watched girlfriends face impossible choices. Risk death through illegal abortion, abandon university. Marry immediately and hope family could support you both. The decree turned reproductive control into state policy. It controlled women's bodies. It controlled their futures. It controlled who could pursue education. Students in the 1980s were decreetzi, children of the decree, born when abortion was illegal, many unwanted, many born into families too poor to feed them. Over 100,000 children abandoned to Romania's orphanages. Conditions there became internationally infamous: malnourishment, physical disabilities, psychological damage. These were the children Ceaușescu wanted to fuel his economic miracle. Many died, many survived with permanent trauma. The students arrested in November 1989, Ceaușescu, Vulpe, Caprariu, Schlachter. They were roughly 22, 23 years old, born around 1966, 1967. First wave of decreții. They grew up seeing what the system did. They knew the cost of resistance. They demonstrated anyway. After study, let's examine the structure students lived within. Romanian universities in the 1980s weren't centers of free inquiry. They were ideological training grounds monitored by party officials. Every faculty had Communist Party representatives. Every department tracked student political reliability. Academic admission required more than grades. Your family background mattered. Were your parents party members? Did you have relatives who fled Romania? Had anyone in your family been arrested? Students from suspect backgrounds faced extra scrutiny. Lower admission rates, worse dormitory assignments, fewer opportunities after graduation. The party created a hereditary system. Good communists raised good communists. Everyone else struggled. Professors walked a tightrope. Teach the approved curriculum. Use approved textbooks. Avoid mentioning banned authors, banned ideas, banned history. Some professors genuinely believed in the system. Others performed belief while quietly helping students. Recommending books in coded language. Answering questions carefully to avoid informants. The best professors, according to student testimonies after 1989, taught by what they didn't say. Pauses that spoke volumes. Emphasis on certain phrases that invited critical thinking without stating it. But this was rare. Most professors kept their heads down. Tenure meant nothing if the Securitate decided you were a problem. Academic freedom didn't exist. Neither did freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of movement. Students couldn't travel without permission. Couldn't gather in groups larger than 3 without official purpose. Couldn't access foreign books, journals, newspapers. The intellectual isolation was deliberate. Keep students ignorant of alternatives. Keep them focused on Ceaușescu's version of socialism. Keep them compliant. But information leaked. Radio Free Europe, broadcasting from West Germany. Voice of America. BBC World Service. Romanians listened despite jamming, despite penalties. You could be arrested for owning a radio capable of receiving foreign frequencies. Students shared what they heard, whispered in dormitories, passed notes in classes. The revolution sweeping Eastern Europe in 1989 reached Romania through these channels. November 9th, Berlin Wall falls. Romanian state media didn't mention it for days. November 11, students demonstrated in Bucharest. They knew what was happening. They wanted reform. They believed change was possible. The Securitate arrested them within hours. 41 days in Rahova. While the world changed outside, while other communist regimes collapsed peacefully, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, all transitioning without bloodshed. Romania would be different. Let's jump forward briefly. December 1989. Revolution. It started in Timișoara. December 16. Hungarian minority protesting pastor Laszlo Tokes eviction. Romanians joined. Protests spread. December 21, Ceaușescu addressed a crowd in Palace Square, Bucharest. Tried to rally support. The crowd booed, chanted Timișoara. Speech was broadcast live. Millions watched their dictator lose control. The army defected. Switched from supporting Ceaușescu to supporting protesters. Riots, street violence, murders. December 22. Ceaușescu and his wife Elena fled Bucharest by helicopter. Captured in Târgoviște. Tried by Drumhead Military Tribunal December 25. Charged with genocide, damage to national economy, abuse of power. Found guilty. Executed immediately. Romania was the only Eastern European country where the revolution turned violent. The only one where the leader was executed. Over 1,104 people died. 162 between December 16 and 22, while Ceaușescu still held power. The remaining 942 after the National Salvation Front took control. Students were at the front lines. University Square in Bucharest became revolution headquarters. Students organized, led demonstrations, fought security forces. After decades of suppression, they exploded. The rage had been building. Those 3 students arrested November 11. Paraschivescu, Vulpe, Caprariu Schlachter. Released December 22 at 2 p.m., 41 days in detention. They walked out of Rahova Penitentiary into a different Romania. Ceaușescu was gone. The Securitate was disbanded, sort of. Many Securitate officers simply transitioned into new intelligence services. The networks remained. The files remained. The culture of surveillance remained. Students who had been informants stayed silent. Victims stayed traumatized. The perpetrators mostly escaped justice. After the revolution, Romanians slowly began processing what had happened. Archives opened. Slowly, reluctantly. Researchers like Denis Delatant, British scholar historian, spent years in Securitate files documenting the regime's methods. His book Ceaușescu and the Securitate, published 1995, remains the definitive work. He was the only non-Romanian scholar granted wide archive access. His documentation shows the system's brutality in detail, how recruitment worked, how interrogations proceeded, how the Securitate manipulated families, how students specifically were targeted. The testimonies are devastating. People describing betrayals by best friends, by lovers, by family members, the social fabric torn apart. Marius Oprea and other Romanian historians continued the work, uncovered the child spy network, documented thousands of cases. But justice remained elusive. Too many people were complicit. Too many still held power. In 1990, Ion Iliescu became president, former communist official. Many National Salvation Front leaders were second-tier party members. They controlled the transition. They controlled what got investigated. They controlled which files stayed sealed. Students in University Square continued protesting through 1990, demanded real change, lustration laws, banning former communists from government. They were met with violence. June 1990. Miners brought to Bucharest to beat protesters. The revolution's momentum died. The old guard reasserted control. Let's examine specific student cases beyond the famous ones. 1980, a student at Faculty of Forestry, not named in available records, distributed leaflets criticizing economic policies, arrested, expelled, sent to canal labor for 2 years. 1983, University of Bucharest student, caught listening to Radio Free Europe, interrogated for 3 days, released with warning, placed under permanent surveillance, academic recommendations blocked, never got the job he trained for. 1985, Cluj student, wrote poetry critical of the regime, shared it with friends. One friend was an informant, arrested. Psychiatric evaluation ordered. The Securitate used psychiatric detention for political cases. Diagnosed with oppositional personality disorder, forced medication, released after 6 months, unable to continue studies. These weren't famous cases. No international coverage, no Radio Free Europe broadcasts, just individual students destroyed by the system. Hundreds of such cases, maybe thousands. The archives are incomplete. Many files destroyed before 1989, more destroyed after. What we know is fragments. Female students faced additional pressures. Decree 770 meant constant monitoring. Monthly gynecological exams at universities. Pregnancy meant expulsion. Some women bribed doctors for false diagnoses, diabetes, hepatitis, conditions that qualified for legal abortion. Doctors who helped risked prison, 1 to 3 months for failing to report illegal abortions. Some still helped, recognized that without help, women died. Dr. Bogdan Marinescu, working at Giulești Maternity Hospital since the 1960s, told Decree Chronicles Journal that he suggested multiple times to communist authorities to allow contraception access, at least for women who fulfilled their quota of children. Suggestion ignored. The regime wanted total control. Adriana Paun, researcher, noted that midwives, the traditional support for women, disappeared. The regime abolished the profession years after Decree 770. Midwives performed abortions, endangered pronatalist politics. Without midwives, birth came under total medical control, state control. Women who attempted abortions delayed coming to hospitals, feared getting caught, arrived with sepsis. kidney failure. Some died. Dr. Oana Pelticu said Decree 770 created infertility as pathology. Wasn't common before. Curettage compromised fallopian tubes. Post-abortion infections led to chronic conditions. Female students who survived illegal abortions sometimes became infertile. Their future reproductive choices stolen by the decree. Their education often lost. Their health damaged. This is what judging students meant under Ceaușescu. Controlling every aspect of their lives. If you value documented authoritarian history and resistance movements like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script uses factual research from sources including historian Christina Dieck's study, Children of the Dictatorship, published in Nationalities, Papers Volume 38, Issue 2 in 2010, analyzing student resistance and the Brasov phenomenon, and the United Nations Development, program studies from 2007 examining post-communist reproductive health, published in collaboration with the Soros Foundation, showing the decree's lasting impacts. Now back to the information. Language matters. The term securitat used for students was intellectual, not just academics. Anyone with higher education, college students, university students, writers, directors, scientists, anyone who opposed the party's philosophy. The Securitate's 1980s campaign to stamp out dissent, according to documents, specifically targeted these intellectuals. Vicious rumors spread. Supposed contacts with Western intelligence, machinations, frame-ups, public denunciations, encouraging conflict between population segments, public humiliation of dissidents, toughened censorship, repression of even the smallest gestures of independence, students making a joke, students asking a question, students reading the wrong book, all gestures of independence, all repressed. The system tolerated zero deviation. Conformity or consequences, academic life became performance. Students performed enthusiasm for Ceaușescu, attended mandatory rallies, chanted slogans, wore red scarves, carried portraits, sang party songs, weekly shows in stadiums dedicated to Ceaușescu, his wife Elena, the Communist Party. The cult of personality was inescapable. Those who performed convincingly got benefits. Better grades, recommendations, jobs. Those who resisted even slightly got marked. Universities kept files on every student. Political reliability scores. Your entire future depended on how well you pretended to believe. This psychological pressure was as damaging as physical violence. You became complicit in your own oppression. You betrayed your values to survive, then lived with that betrayal. Many students after 1989 described shame, guilt, depression. They had done what was necessary. They had survived. But at what cost? Their integrity, their ideals, their sense of self. Compare this to other Eastern European countries. Poland had solidarity, an organized opposition movement. Workers and intellectuals united. The church provided protection, space to organize. Romania had no equivalent. The Orthodox Church was co-opted. Bishops appointed by the party. Priests monitored by the Securitate. 4,200 clergy were informants according to Securitate recruitment data. Religion offered no safe haven. Labor unions were party-controlled. No independent organization was possible. Intellectuals were isolated. Students were isolated. Everyone was isolated. That was the key. The Securitate created atomization. Every person alone, afraid, suspicious, unable to trust anyone enough to organize. This is why Romania's revolution came late, why it was violent. Without structures for a peaceful transition, without organizations to channel dissent, the explosion when it came was chaotic. The irony is, Ceaușescu started different. 1965. He became General Secretary after Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dege's death. Early years showed promise. Condemned Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968. Asserted Romanian independence from Moscow. Opened relations with the West. Richard Nixon visited Bucharest, 1969. First U.S. president to visit a communist country. Ceaușescu got most favored nation trade status. Romania became the maverick of the Eastern Bloc. Independent foreign policy. Western loans. Modernization. Students in the late 1960s, early 1970s had reason for optimism. But fascination with China and North Korea changed everything. Ceaușescu visited both, returned obsessed with their models. Cult of personality, total control, systematization. By the mid-1970s, repression intensified. By the 1980s, Romania was the most repressive state in Eastern Europe. The man who condemned Soviet tanks in Prague became worse than those he criticized. Students who grew up hearing about Romanian independence lived under surveillance exceeding even East Germany's Stasi. The betrayal of promise made it worse. Economics played a role. Ceaușescu borrowed heavily in the 1970s, built oil refineries, expected to sell refined Middle Eastern oil at profit. Oil prices collapsed. 1981, massive debt. Ceaușescu decided to pay it off rapidly. Austerity, export everything, food, industrial goods, electricity. Romanians got rations. Breadlines. Meat became luxury. Heating limited. Electricity rationed. Darkness, cold, hunger. Students studied in unheated libraries. Lived in dormitories with hours of power daily. ate cabbage soup and bread. Protein was rare. The physical deprivation added to psychological control. Hard to organize revolution when you're cold and hungry. Hard to think critically when you're malnourished. This was also control. Keep the population weak. Keep them focused on survival. Keep them from noticing what's stolen from them. Ceaușescu and Elena lived in mansions. Multiple homes, servants, imported food, fur coats for Elena, expensive cars for their son Nicu. The contrast was obscene. Students saw it. Everyone saw it. The gap between propaganda and reality. The lie of socialism. We're building communism together while the leaders loot the treasury. An estimated $1 billion hidden in offshore accounts. Never recovered. Students in November 1989 demonstrating with placards. We want reforms. That was the demand. Not revolution, not capitalism. Just reforms. Acknowledgement that the system wasn't working, openness, honesty, the bare minimum, and they were arrested for it. 41 days detention, interrogation. Rahova Penitentiary was Category 2 prison. Not the worst, not the Gulag level camps, but a real prison. Criminal inmates, political prisoners, harsh conditions. The students there saw what dissent cost, met others who resisted, heard their stories. For 41 days they lived in that reality. Then December 22, released into chaos, revolution. Their placards had asked for reforms. Romania got blood. 1,104 dead. 3,352 injured. The students who survived carried that weight. What if we'd started earlier? What if more had joined us? What if the demonstration spread before Securitate cracked down? Survivors' guilt and revolutionary pride mixed together. The story doesn't end cleanly. Ion Iliescu's government, 1990 through 1996, maintained many communist structures. Securitate became SRI Romanian Intelligence Service, SAI Foreign Intelligence Service, SPP Protection and Guard Service, STS Special Telecommunications Service. New names, many same people. Emil Constantinescu became president 1996. Promised lustration, truth and reconciliation. Made some progress. Archives opened more. CNSS, the National Council for Studying Securitate Archives, established 1999. Began documenting, identifying informants, publishing names. Slowly, painfully, victims confronted. Why did you inform on me? We were friends. We were family. Some informants claimed coercion. Most did. Some admitted they believed. Some showed no remorse. The social wounds remain. 25 years after revolution. 30 years. Now, 35 years later, Romania is democracy. European Union member since 2007. NATO since 2004. Students today study freely, access any information, criticize government, organize, protest, rights. The 1989 generation died for, but the trauma lingers. Older Romanians remember, they whisper. They don't trust. They taught their children caution. Catherine Verdery, American anthropologist, studied in Romania in 1970s and 80s, got her Securitate file after 1989. 2,781 pages. 70 informants tracked her. She wrote a book, My Life as a Spy, published in Romania in 2018. Romanian reception was intense. Andrea Ciru, reviewer late 30s, cried, describing the book's impact. I was told not to say things at school and kindergarten. Our parents were afraid and didn't speak in front of us. It's almost 30 years after communism ended, and people still think they can get into trouble. Romanians lived with trauma that you can't trust anyone, and people still haven't got over this yet. That's what surveillance states do. They break trust. They break social bonds. They break people, and the breaking lasts generations. Back to the students. What happened to them, specifically after 1989? Cătălin Bia, Lucian Silaghi, Horia Șerban. The three arrested in Brasov, November 1987. Rehabilitated after the revolution, their arrests expunged. Their academic records cleared. Some returned to university, completed degrees. Others couldn't go back. The trauma, the lost time, the knowledge that their sacrifice changed nothing immediately. Brasov erected a monument to the November 15, 1987 revolt. The students are remembered, but remembering doesn't undo. Mihnea Paraschivescu. Grațian Vulpe, Dancă Prariu Schlachter. The November 1989-3. Also rehabilitated, also honored, also carrying 41 days in Rahova. The interrogations, the uncertainty, the fear. Paraschivescu later spoke about it. The isolation was worst, not knowing what was happening outside. Whether anyone knew where they were, whether their families were safe, the Securitate's favorite tactic. Threaten the family, your mother, your father, your siblings. Students broke to protect family more than to protect themselves. This is how you control people. Make them responsible for others' safety. Make resistance selfish. Make compliance seem like love. The broader student population after 1989 faced different challenges. Integration into capitalism, free market. Privatization, the economy collapsed. Unemployment, inflation. Many students graduated into nothing. No jobs, no prospects. The freedom they fought for came with economic devastation. Some emigrated. Brain drain. Romania lost talented young people to Western Europe. North America, Australia. They left seeking opportunities communism denied them, but also opportunities the new democracy couldn't provide. First wave migration in the 1990s. Second wave after EU accession. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. Students who would have rebuilt Romania instead, scattered globally. This is also cost, not just deaths in revolution. The loss of human capital, the loss of talent, the loss of potential. Consider what students lost. Years of surveillance, years of fear, years of performing loyalty they didn't feel. Educational opportunities stolen, careers destroyed, families monitored, health damaged by Decree 770, childhood stolen by recruitment as child spies, integrity compromised by forced informing, trust broken by betrayals. The psychological damage was massive. Post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, paranoia. Alcoholism rates soared after 1989. Suicide rates increased. Domestic violence. The social pathologies of totalitarianism outlived the regime that caused them. Students of the 1980s became adults of the 1990s. They raised children. They tried to build normal lives, but normal had been stolen from them. They had to reinvent what normal meant, create it from scratch, while dealing with unprocessed trauma, while living in a society that wanted to forget. Move forward, not dwell. Many victims felt abandoned, their suffering acknowledged but not addressed. No reparations, no therapy. Just move on, build democracy, get a job, pay bills, survive again. Let's return to one detail. Securitate stations in maternity hospitals. Officers watching gynecologists, examining stillborn babies, looking for evidence of illegal abortion. Dr. Elena Borza's testimony about desperate methods, salt, detergent, soap bubbles, needles in the uterus, underground operations without anesthesia. Over 9,000 women died. Think about that number, 9,000, in a population of 23 million. That's not abstract. That's mothers, sisters, daughters, friends, classmates. Every university had students who knew someone. Every dormitory had women who faced the choice. Risk death or abandon education, risk infertility or carry unwanted pregnancy. The male students watched helplessly, couldn't protect their girlfriends, couldn't help without risking their own futures. The regime turned men into complicit observers, turned women into victims, destroyed any possibility of solidarity. Everyone isolated, everyone afraid, everyone guilty. This is genius of totalitarian control. Make everyone culpable. Everyone has something to hide. Everyone collaborated somehow. Then no one can condemn anyone else. No one is innocent. No one can claim moral high ground. The system corrupts everyone it touches. That corruption was the point. Final numbers tell the story. December 16 to 22, 1989. 162 deaths. Timișoara, Bucharest, other cities. December 22 to December 31st. 942 deaths. After Ceaușescu fled. After military declared support for revolution. Deaths from confusion. From security forces that didn't know who to shoot. From units attacking each other. From paranoia about Securitate terrorists. Terrorists that mostly didn't exist. Crossfire, accidents, murder. 3,352 injured total. 1,107 before Ceaușescu fell. 2,245 after. University students were significant casualties, fighting on the front lines, organizing demonstrations, occupying University Square, broadcasting from radio stations, taking over television. Students who survived decades of suppression finally acted and paid in blood. Those who died became heroes. Those who survived became veterans. But the revolution was messy, the aftermath messier. Heroes don't always get happy endings. Veterans carry wounds. Romania got freedom, got democracy, got European integration, but it cost. The students of the 1980s paid the bill. Here's what gets forgotten. The students who informed, who collaborated, who sold out classmates for privileges, they also survived. They also became adults. They also built careers. Some became teachers, professors, politicians, business leaders. They lived with what they did. Some justify it. Had no choice. Everyone did it. It was survival. Some feel guilty. Some feel nothing. The point is, they're still there. In Romanian society, teaching the next generation, making decisions, holding power. You can't purge everyone. Too many people were involved. So Romania learned to live with ghosts, with people who betrayed you, teaching your children, with officials who tortured running for office, with informants as neighbors. This is reality of post-totalitarian society. The perpetrators don't vanish. They adapt. They survive. Sometimes they thrive. Justice is partial, incomplete, unsatisfying, but necessary work continues, slowly. One more case. Timișoara, 1956. 3,000 students arrested. Largest single student persecution. That number, 3,000. From one city, one university. Mass arrests following the Hungarian Revolution. Most expelled, some imprisoned, some sent to labor camps. Many disappeared into the system. Parents didn't know where their children were. Students didn't know if they'd ever see freedom. The 1950s terror was worse than the 1980s, more violent, more arbitrary, less documented. But it set the pattern. Ceaușescu inherited a system built by Gheorghiu Dej and perfected it. Added surveillance technology, added psychological manipulation, added economic control, made it total. Students in 1989 were third generation. They heard stories from parents about 1950s. They heard about 1977 Jew Valley miners. They heard about 1987 Brasov workers. They knew the history of resistance. They knew the cost, and they demonstrated anyway. November 11, 1989. We want reforms. That courage despite knowledge, despite fear, despite history. That's heroism, not superhero heroism. Human heroism. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things, knowing they might die or worse. Worse meaning Rahova, meaning interrogation, meaning family threatened, meaning future destroyed. They did it anyway. Contemporary Romania struggles with memory. How to remember communism. Heroes and villains are complicated. Ion Iliescu, who became president after revolution, was himself imprisoned under earlier regime, tortured, then became party member, rose through ranks, fell from Ceaușescu's favor, was marginalized but not destroyed. Revolution happened. Iliescu assumed control. Was he hero or opportunist? Victim or perpetrator? He was both. That's what makes it complicated. Students who became informants, were they traitors or victims? They were coerced. They were threatened. They also made choices. They also hurt people. Both things can be true. Romania doesn't have clear narrative, unlike Poland's solidarity, unlike Czechoslovakia's Velvet Revolution, unlike Hungary's negotiated transition. Romania has blood and confusion and moral ambiguity. The students who died were heroes. The students who survived are veterans. The students who informed are also survivors. This doesn't excuse. It complicates. History is messy. People are complex. Systems are brutal. These things coexist. The archive work continues. CONISAS operates within limits. Political pressure, legal challenges, former Securitate officers suing to block revelations, victims dying before getting answers, files destroyed, files hidden, files incomplete, but historians persist. Marius Oprea, Denis Delatant, Christina Diac, Stegar Lolaru, many others. They document, they research, they publish, they teach, they ensure the next generation knows. Romania's young people learn in school about communism, about Ceaușescu, about revolution. Whether they understand is a different question. History is abstract until it's personal, until it's your grandmother who was forced into monthly exams, your grandfather who informed to keep his job, your parent who demonstrated in University Square, your neighbor who was a Securitate officer. Then it's real. Then it matters. Romanian society slowly processes. Museums open, memorials erected, publications multiply, truth emerges, slowly, painfully, necessarily. Students today have freedom unimaginable to 1980s generation. Internet access, social media, study abroad, international connections. They protest government, they organize movements, they criticize openly. They don't get arrested. Usually, Romania is imperfect democracy. Corruption persists, problems remain. But students can dissent without disappearing. That's progress. That's what those November 1989 demonstrators wanted. Reforms, openness, freedom. They got more than they asked for. They got revolution. Cost more than they imagined, but they got it. Consider the contrast. November 15, 1987. Cătălin Bia holding placard, arrested within minutes. November 11, 1989. Paraschivescu Vulpe Căprariu Schlachter demonstrating, arrested within hours. December 21, 1989. Thousands in Palace Square. Buin Ceaușescu, army defected. Revolution succeeded, 2 years difference. November 87 to December 89. The system seemed eternal, seemed unbreakable. Then it collapsed in days. This teaches important lesson. Totalitarian regimes are fragile. They depend on fear. When fear breaks, they crumble. The students who resisted, who demonstrated, who held placards, they broke the fear. Not immediately, not alone, but they contributed. Every act of resistance mattered. Every gesture of independence mattered. Every student who refused to collaborate mattered. They didn't know it would matter. They couldn't see the future. They acted from principle, from courage, from desperation. And collectively, those actions added up. Brasov workers, November 87. Cluj students, November 89. Timișoara protesters, December 89. Each built on previous resistance. Each made the next possible. Until critical mass. Until revolution. Here's the reveal most people miss. In Rahova Penitentiary Courtyard, there's a section. Political prisoners from 1980s. The students arrested November 1989 were held there. In cells where dissidents spent years, surrounded by history they didn't know yet was theirs. When they were released, December 22, they walked through corridors where previous generation had been tortured. The building still stands. Category 2 prison, still operating. Criminals now, not political prisoners, but the walls remember, the cells remember. If you visit today, which you can, Rahova is partially open to researchers, you can see where students waited, where they were interrogated, where they wondered if they'd ever leave. The space is cold. It's damp. It's exactly what you imagine prison to be. But knowing who was there, knowing what they did, knowing they walked out into revolution, into freedom, into history, that transforms the space. It's no longer just prison. It's a monument to resistance, to courage, to the cost of dissent under totalitarianism. The students didn't choose to be heroes. They chose to act. The regime made them heroes by arresting them, by threatening them, by trying to break them. Every attempt to suppress made the resistance more meaningful. Every arrest validated the cause. Ceaușescu created his own opposition. His brutality made heroes of ordinary students. His system's collapse proved them right. They wanted reforms. They got revolution. They suffered for it. They survived it. And they changed history. That's how Ceaușescu judged students. Swift arrests, harsh interrogations, permanent surveillance, academic destruction, family threats, future erasure, total control. And that's how students answered, with placards, with demonstrations, with refusal to be silent, with a resistance that cost them everything and gave Romania freedom. The judgment was brutal. The response was courage. The outcome was revolution. Those 41 days in Rahova, those 7 arrests in Brasov, those 3,000 in Timișoara. Each case matters. Each person matters. Each story of resistance against impossible odds matters. Because totalitarianism depends on silence, on fear, on isolation. And every voice that breaks the silence, every demonstration that breaks the fear, every connection that breaks the isolation, weakens the system until it falls, like it did December 1989, when students and workers and ordinary Romanians said enough, when they refused to be judged, when they became judges of history, of Ceaușescu, of the regime that tried to break them and failed. The students arrested November 11, 1989, walked out of Rahova Penitentiary December 22 at 2 p.m. into a country without Ceaușescu, into a revolution they helped start, into a future uncertain but free. Their 41 days in detention became their credential. Proof they resisted, proof they mattered, proof that even under the most brutal surveillance, even facing the Securitate, even knowing the cost, ordinary people can choose courage, can choose resistance, can change history. That's the story. Not just what the regime did to students, but what students did despite the regime. Not just the judgment, but the refusal to accept judgment. Not just the brutality, but the courage that answered it. Not just the system, but the people who broke it. That's what gets forgotten. That's what matters most. The students who stood up when standing up meant everything could be taken, and stood anyway, and won.